I see a lot of people who've been in therapy for a long time for emotional eating and binge eating. And the reason why they don't get to exactly where they want to be is because they're only focused on one of these three components. There's still a biological component and there's still a social component. And the same thing with diet. And the problem with diet is that diet's only going to address maybe the biological aspect. Sure, you can eat a certain way to try to regulate your insulin and maybe your cortisol, but there's still two other major components that are gonna still keep you stuck. The good news is there's, first of all, a way to get out of it. And the second part of the good news is that if you've been just focusing on one of these things and you've been seeing somebody for a long time but not getting the results that you want, it's not because it's not working, it's because it's just incomplete. Welcome back, friends. I'm your host, Sherry Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food, fall in love with fitness, and ultimately yourself. My intention in each episode is to help you release the old story of who you are and step into the one you're always meant to be. We'll challenge conventional diet and fitness culture and understand the importance of tuning out all the shoulds they tell us to do and tuning into our own inner wisdom instead. What you focus on, you create more of. Through these conversations, you'll shift your focus from what you're supposed to be doing to who you want to be, so that health and fitness and ease around food is not just what you do, but who you are. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then I want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook community at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly and access all the free trainings and resources we have for you so you can regulate your nervous system and make peace with food. And then also remember to share this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this today. The links are in the show notes. Did you know that regulating your nervous system can be the key to overcoming self-sabotage, including addictive behaviors and habits? It's also the key to speeding up a sluggish metabolism, as well as making peace with food so that you can feel relaxed and centered around the choices that you make when it comes to nutrition. In today's episode of the podcast, we're going to focus on understanding how self-sabotage, negative self-talk, and even fear is shaping your life. And I'm going to talk about how crucial it is to regulate your nervous system, which is going to help you shift from a state of protection mode into one of safety mode so that your body can naturally release all its cravings, all its addictive behavior, as well as any unwanted weight it's been holding on to feel safe. And so when we're able to do this, we can actually not only shift our metabolism, but we can also change the quality of our thoughts and our overall well-being. And fear, instead of it being this thing that holds us back, can actually become our guide, our intuition. It can become our blind spot detector and show us opportunities that can help us become more aware of the things we're not aware of. Today, I'm also going to introduce some powerful techniques to help you make lasting changes, like healing the inner child, how to manage your metabolism through thought alone, and how to boost emotional intelligence so that you respond to your environment instead of react to it. Now, some of the topics we are going to be covering together today is number one, understanding fear and learning how to use fear as your guide to shift from protection mode to safety mode. Number two, exploring inner child healing and its impact on speeding up your metabolism. And number three, investing in personal growth through coaching and immersing yourself in a like-minded environment. If you're listening to today's episode and you feel like food and dieting and weight and body image has completely taken over your life, has complete power over you, I hope this conversation brings you the comfort and inspiration that you're searching for. And remember, you're not alone. Healing is possible. If you've ever felt like you know exactly what to do, but you just can't bring yourself to do the things that you know to do, then I want to invite you to join me during my 3-day Break the Cycle Masterclass, where I'm going to be talking about how to overcome binge eating and emotional eating and how to regulate your nervous system so that you're no longer engaging in these unwanted eating behaviors. And this isn't a 3-day masterclass on weight loss, by the way. This is a 3-day masterclass on understanding how to break free from the cycle that's resulting in the side effect of weight gain. And that's the big difference, because you know this by now, that repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is called insanity. You know that dieting doesn't work. You know that it's not about hard discipline and getting yourself to be on another plan or hiring a nutritionist to tell you what to eat. You know all the things. Heck, I bet you can even write a book on all the things. But what you do want to uncover is, why is it that you continue to sabotage? Why does it feel like you're always on the wagon or off the wagon? And that's exactly why I'd love for you to join me during this 3-day Break the Cycle Masterclass that I'm giving completely free. Now you can register at sherryshaban.com/break the cycle. Again, sherryshaban.com/break the cycle. Again, it's completely free to join. And the goal during these 3 days together is to uncover why it is that you continue to engage in unwanted eating behaviors, even though you know exactly what to do. sherryshaban.com/break the cycle. All right, now let's get into it. Well, welcome back to a part 2 of the Rapid Release Masterclass. So thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for joining in today. These 3 days are going to be so epic. And I have to be super honest with you. I spent so much time trying to narrow down what we're going to be talking about today, because at the end of these 3 days, I want to give you all the information, all the tools, the complete strategy that I use to help my clients overcome their cravings. And as you know, the conversation is going to be about food, and we always talk about making peace with food. But I also want to invite you to go ahead and plug in anything else that you notice that you have cravings for. I mean, this can even be something like social media. It could be something like impulse shopping, because we do emotionally eat, and we emotionally are drawn to watch things on shows or Netflix that tend to distract us and take us away from what's really going on in our lives that could be uncomfortable in the very moment. But we also emotionally buy. We also emotionally purchase. So as we go through these conversations over these 3 days, again, I want to remind you that how you do anything is how you do everything. And when we're talking about emotional eating, I'm going to tell you that even if you have this tendency to snack at night, you know you've eaten enough throughout the day, but then after dinner, this thing happens where you find yourself again in that habit of sitting in front of the TV and munching on your favorite snacks. That is a form of emotional eating. And I'm going to be talking about binge eating again, because I want to change this definition. I want us to sit in a space where it's not charged, it's just a word that we are not using to describe or label ourselves, but instead we're using to understand that we do this anytime we are feeling out of control / out of integrity. And out of control really means I intended to do something and then found myself doing something else entirely. I said I wasn't going to consume these foods, or I said that I was not going to have seconds, or I said that I'm going to avoid certain foods because I noticed they give me inflammation, they give me an upset stomach, I don't feel so great the next morning, it maybe even disrupts my sleep, I have a hard time digesting them, and yet here I am still consuming them. So before we get started, as you know, I want to get a temperature check as to why you are here. So I'm going to start off by putting a poll in the chat. And I just want you to take a moment and answer this. I'm curious as to which of these sound the most familiar to you. Which of these sound the most familiar to you? Now, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, and some of you have been on maybe my third or fourth masterclass. You've done a few rounds here with me. So I'm curious, what is it that you're still searching for? What is it that you're still needing some support around? And so those of you following maybe the replay or you're following elsewhere, here's the question. Which of these sound familiar to you? 1, you're doing all the right things, but it's not working the way that it used to. 2, it feels like no matter what you try, whether that's keto or macros or shakes, it only seems to be effective for a short time before your body rebels again. Number 3, you know that if it weren't for the intense cravings, evening snacking, and emotional eating, you'd be exactly where you want to be because you know exactly what you're supposed to do. 4, you avoid clothes shopping. You turn down social events or find yourself hiding in photos so you don't have to show your body. 5, you can be super disciplined until suddenly you lose control and go off the deep end, wondering why it keeps happening. All right, so gonna give you a moment here, and feel free also to comment in the chat, because like I shared, when you come on to these masterclasses, I want this to be a conversation. I want you to participate in the conversation because we're gonna be unpacking, like I said, my exact strategy over these 3 days as to how I help my clients completely abolish all their cravings. And there's going to be 3 systems that we're going to be tackling. We're tackling 3 systems over these 3 days to help anybody overcome any type of craving. I say the word craving, but also feel free to plug in the word addiction. Any tendency where you're drawn to a behavior or to a substance. Like, I know exactly what to do, but I just love chocolate. I know exactly what to do, but I just can't stop that nighttime snacking. Or weekends and evenings are usually my cheat meal. It's where I take a break from that regimen that I'm usually doing. All right? So all of those are signs of cravings, right? And how do we know that? If you look at the other things in your life where you actually are pretty consistent, that you're not either on the wagon or off the wagon, you notice that you're pretty consistent around, you'll notice that there's no tendency to deviate. There's no craving to deviate. You're not married during the week and then you take a break on the weekends and then come back and get married during the week and take a break on the weekends. Or if you did that with your job, what would happen? Or if you have kids, imagine, well, I feel like taking care of them now, but then I'm going to take the next couple of days off and not take care of them anymore. And I'm going to come back and take care of them maybe starting Monday, right? So anytime you're noticing you have this behavior where, again, you know what to do, you actually want to do the thing that you know to do, but you're having a hard time committing, it's not a willpower thing. This is going to be something that you've habitually taught yourself through programming your nervous system to do over and over and over again. And anything that we repeat becomes an addiction. Anything that we repeat becomes a program that the unconscious mind just continues to play. And this is exactly what you're going to learn about over these 3 days, learning how to uncover, first of all, these patterns that you may not be aware of, and second of all, how to interrupt them. And there are 3 things you have to do to interrupt these patterns. And before I get into that, I'm just going to pause a moment here and just ask you a question in the chat. So give me a 1. Give me a 1 in the chat if you actually do know the things to do, but you're having a hard time committing to them. You know what to do, but you're having a hard time committing to them. Okay, so Martine, Janet, thank you for sharing. That's a 1. Okay, great. Now give me a 2 in the chat if you notice that you're maybe doing really well for a long period of time. You can get super motivated. You can get super inspired. Maybe it's almost your birthday. Maybe it's New Year's resolutions. But then a life event happens and then you find yourself completely falling off that wagon, as they call it. So you do pretty well for a certain amount of time. Write a 2 in the chat. You do pretty well for a certain amount of time, so long as everything in your life is going great. There are no big life events happening, no stressful events happening. You can be super disciplined when no stressful events are happening. All right, I'm also getting lots of 2s. Okay. And now give me a 3 in the chat if you're here because you have a tendency to nighttime snack. You have a tendency to nighttime snack. Give me a 3 in the chat if you have a tendency to nighttime snack. All right. That's right. Okay. Okay, Willie Dietz says 2. Janet 3. Okay, Sharon 2. So no nighttime snackers here, I take it? It looks like just one person said, yes, I do snack at night. Okay, great. All right, so if you're here and you plan to spend these next 3 days with me, I want to first and foremost tell you that this is not a masterclass on dieting and weight loss. I am not here to help you lose weight. I'm going to be completely honest because this will give you an opportunity to save your time. And I'm also not a weight loss coach because what I actually do is I help people become that version of themselves that is that lighter weight that they wish to become. So if you're here, for example, with a weight loss goal of 50 pounds, first and foremost, I'm going to tell you to change that goal and to remove the word weight loss from your vocabulary, because anything that you lost, you're always going to unconsciously want to find. So instead, we're gonna plug in the word release instead of lost. So if you're here to release 50 pounds, this is a very different conversation. And like I shared, what I'm going to help you do is I'm going to help you become the person who is X number of pounds lighter. And why that's really different is you can be the same person who has tendencies to cope with food, who has tendencies to cope with other substances. And if your goal is to lose weight, well, you're going to find some sort of diet that will give you that short-term result. But what's always going to happen is you're always going to be that person who's coping with food because they're trying to regulate their emotions. And this is why we constantly see people getting on the wagon and off the wagon, or having a hard time staying consistent when it comes to eating in a certain way. And I see this often with people who are very extreme in their diets, doing things like keto or carnivore. And while all of these different ways of eating has merit depending on the person, what I'm most curious about and what I want to help you uncover is why is it that you know what to do, you know the information, and I actually believe that all information should be accessible, which is why I do these masterclasses. But why is it that you have a hard time staying consistent with the things that you know to do? And so before I move on, I'm going to just read some of the questions here in the chat. What would you consider nighttime snacking? Nighttime snacking is eating after dark. So after your last meal, which would be dinner, you're still eating. So after that last meal, which happened to be a balanced meal of maybe some protein, maybe some complex carbs if you're doing that, and maybe some vegetables, you're still continuing to eat after that meal. That would be nighttime snacking. Nighttime eating also would be that you don't eat very much during the day, and then you eat the majority of your intake in the evening. So maybe you snack, eat light things throughout the day because you're having a salad for lunch, and then you had your chia pudding for breakfast, but then at dinner time, you're eating the largest amount of your nutrients and your energy intake. Does that answer your question, Will? Okay, so in that case, if you weren't sure how to answer that question when I asked you, are you a nighttime snacker? Feel free to put in a 3 in the chat and let me know. Linda says that she needs balance with everything. Melanie says, I'm here because like reminders of healthy habits and mindset, you don't find it in many places, and I want to make them habits. That's awesome. Super happy you're here then, Melanie. Super happy you're here. Okay, so let's get into it because we have a lot of super exciting things to talk about over the next few days. Today, specifically, I want to talk about the restrict, binge, punish, promise cycle, okay? And I want you to start uncovering that. I want you to start looking for that and noticing if you are doing that behavior. And if you understand how this behavior works, because we're going to break it up, we're going to talk about the biological aspects of it, we're going to talk about the physiological aspects of it, and we're also going to talk about the social aspects of it, so that you understand that the reason why you continue to do these behaviors is multifaceted. And the reason why many of us can't overcome emotional eating is because generally we're focusing just on one of these things. We're trying to just address one of these 3 things, and that just keeps us stuck longer. On day 2, we're going to learn why the body's been so stubborn this whole time. What does that mean, stubborn? Stubborn means that it seems like as soon as you lose the weight, your body wants to find it again. It seems like nothing sticks. It also seems like when you're doing really well and you're getting good progress and results, all of a sudden you find yourself with these intense cravings and feeling out of control. And again, resorting and reverting back to old habits and old behaviors. So you're going to understand exactly how to get your body unstubborn and the one thing that you have to do so that your body works with you instead of against you. And then on day 3, that is going to be the highlight day. So make sure that you join in on day 3 because we're going to be breaking the cycle of emotional eating and binge eating together. And we're going to do that through a very powerful hypnotherapy technique that I have in store for you. And now, like I shared, this conversation is not going to be on weight loss. It's going to be on understanding how to reduce your behavior. In fact, eliminate your behavior. Because what would happen if you stopped nighttime snacking? What would happen if you learned how to get your body to stop those cravings? So some people in the chat said, oh, I've got the chocolate cravings, I've got sugar cravings, or maybe I crave pasta, maybe I crave bread. There are certain foods that I crave. And what would happen if I no longer crave these foods? Now, I didn't say what would happen if I no longer eat these foods. I said, what would happen if I no longer crave these foods? And that is the difference between what you and I are going to be doing together by addressing the nervous system versus going on a diet. Because every diet's going to tell you don't eat those things. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. You don't need anyone to tell you that. Every single diet tells you don't eat these things. If you don't eat these things, you're going to release weight. Yeah, like we didn't know that. But the thing is, we know these things, and yet the cravings are intense. In fact, they get more and more and more intense over time. And the more we play this record, which you're going to learn over these 3 days, that your subconscious mind has habituated, the more you're going to crave these things. The more you're going to desire them. The more actually you make certain things off limits for you, you end up craving them more. And so these cravings are intense, and cravings are what create that addiction that they talk about. Because if the cravings weren't there, of course, we wouldn't even be thinking about eating certain foods. Now, put a 1 in the chat if you drink coffee. Are you a coffee drinker? Are you a coffee drinker? I am. I love coffee. That's like the one thing that I have to say I won't ever give up. It's the one thing I won't ever give up. All right, so who is not a coffee drinker? Who's not a coffee drinker? Martine Decaf, okay. Who doesn't drink coffee? Karina doesn't drink coffee. Willie Dietz doesn't drink coffee. Right. You don't drink coffee. And for those of you, and Jacinth, you don't drink coffee. Sharon, herbal tea. Okay, for those of you who don't drink coffee, you don't drink coffee. Do you have a craving for coffee? Do you have a craving for coffee? Let me know in the chat. Do you have a craving for coffee? Nope, never tasted it. No cravings. All right. Sharon, for sure you have cravings because you're just switching to herbal tea. That's right. Yeah, those are the cravings that you're overcoming because your body has created that dependency on coffee. And Melanie loves coffee. Yeah, same. So if you don't drink coffee and you don't have a craving for coffee, you never have to worry about whether or not you should avoid coffee. It's just not something that's on your mind. It's not even something that you think about. It's not even a way that you'd start your day. And so this is the work that we're going to do together. This is what happens when you work on your nervous system. The cravings are not there. You don't have to fight any urges. You don't have to force discipline. You don't have to try to coerce yourself into doing something that maybe you don't feel like doing. That almost feels like a punishment sometimes, especially when you're watching other people enjoy certain things and you can't. Or you want it so badly, you desire it so badly, and you're not letting yourself have it. So when you work on the nervous system, you abolish the cravings. And if you abolish the cravings, then it's not even something that's on your mind. Very similar to those who shared in the chat today, I don't even drink coffee, I don't crave it. Of course. And then they don't have to apply willpower. For me to not have a cup of coffee, I would have to think about it. I'd have to commit to it. I'd have to make a big promise to myself. I'd have to try to replace it with something else. But that becomes way more challenging to do. And at one point, if I don't have that strong mindset, or if something happens in my world and suddenly it drives me to have a cup of coffee, well, of course, that desire is so much stronger. That urge to have it, that craving is always going to win, no matter what. So put a 1 in the chat if that's resonating with you today. Put a 1 in the chat if that's resonating. And then put a 2 in the chat if this is sounding different than the usual conversation around dieting. All right. And thank you for your participation. Thank you for engaging in the comments. All right, so before we move on and we start talking about the restrict, binge, punish, promise cycle and how to identify it, I'm going to share with you a little bit of who I am and why you should even be listening to me. So my name is Sherry Shaban. For those of you who don't know me, I am based out of Montreal, Canada. Back in the day, lifetime ago almost, I used to be a CrossFit gym owner. And ever since the pandemic gifted me with the ability to shift in the dynamics of how I'm able to reach people, I have created a presence in the online space where I help people make peace with food. And why this particular conversation is very important to me is because there was a time in my life where I was so incredibly regimented with my nutrition. This was back when I owned my CrossFit gyms. And I had taken all of the different nutrition science courses, and I was helping people find their macros and trying to get on the best right way to eat. And what I actually found myself doing is turning my cheat meals into full-on weekend-long binge eating sessions. And this, by the way, can happen to anybody. And once I discovered that this was something that I was having a very hard time overcoming, I felt like I was struggling. I felt like I was trapped. I had no idea how to get out of it. And no amount of willpower and no amount of meal prepping was able to get me back on track long enough to stay consistent. I realized that the reason why all of the clients that I was working with, that I was giving them 6-week plans and 28-day plans, and we were doing all these challenges at the gym, the reason why they were getting short-term results, and then as soon as the challenge was over, they'd revert back to their unwanted eating behaviors, was for the exact same reason that I was secretly struggling. What had happened was I had put my body into what I call protection mode. This is a nervous system response. You may know it as fight or flight. You may know it as sympathetic nervous state. And when you're in this state, the body's response to any thought of unsafety or any threat that it's sensing in the environment, whether that is an actual real threat, whether that's a threat starting from a thought, whether that's a threat because you're putting it in food scarcity, meaning you're limiting foods, you're limiting food groups, you're limiting calories, you're restricting yourself. Anytime this happens, the body's survival response is to binge eat and to get you to store extra energy in the form of body fat, because that's exactly what needs to happen when we are in an emergency situation. When you are feeling unsafe in your environment, and how do you know you feel unsafe? Well, your feelings and your emotions are the best thermostat for that. You're feeling unsafe if you're always worried, if you're always stressed, if you're always anxious, if you're always fearful or doubtful about something, whether that is your body, whether that's your health, whether that's your finances, whether that's your relationship, or whether that's the state of the world. If the majority of your thoughts are fearful thoughts, and we're going to talk way more about this tomorrow, if that's the case, you're constantly triggering yourself into protection mode. Somebody else could be triggering you to have those fearful thoughts. It could be your boss. It could be work. It could be politics. It could be what you follow on the media. And it could also be how you're eating. All of these things are triggering your body to store body fat. That's just what happens. And body fat is the most precious tissue in the body. You're all here because, yes, maybe you're curious to learn more, but I know there's more to that. You're not just here to learn. You're here because you know you're looking for an answer. You know you're looking for a solution, especially if you've been on my masterclass 2 or 3 times. You're still trying to find a solution, because if you had already found it, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't still be here trying to understand, why is it that I know what to do and yet my body's still being stubborn? And this is a nervous system response. And why the conversation of fear is really important is because every single unwanted eating behavior starts with fear. Every unwanted eating behavior starts with fear. And that is craving for sugar, or overeating, or needing to finish off somebody else's plate, maybe needing to finish off your kids' plate. That is nighttime snacking. That's stress eating, emotionally eating, or if you've dieted a lot, that is your cheat meal. It all starts with fear. Again, we're going to break that down way more on day 2. Because if you understand that fear is what triggers your nervous system, then you're going to also be able to interrupt that pattern. You're going to learn that that fear is created in the mind. And the truth is, your health starts in the mind. And as we start to unpack that, you're also going to learn how to look out for this record. I'm going to keep saying the word record because tomorrow you're going to see exactly what I mean by this record playing in and out every single day. And this is a subconscious record. We're not even aware that this happens. We just mindlessly find ourselves sometimes gravitating towards certain snacks or certain behaviors very unconsciously, very unaware that there actually was a sequence of events that happened that brought us here. And it's the same sequence of events that's on repeat every single time. And so why you should listen to me is because I've been in this space where I've personally struggled myself. And I should have been a know-it-all because I had a degree in biochemistry. I had a degree in exercise science. I'm a certified athletic therapist. I'm an osteopath. I ran a gym for over 10 years. I've worked with thousands of people. And this was a common thing that I saw over and over again that nutrition science just could not explain. Because nutrition science is going to tell you how many calories are in a gram of carbohydrates. And it's going to tell you how to get into a calorie deficit. And it's going to tell you that you should move more and eat less in order to get the results that you want. And maybe even tell you that if you take out carbs for the rest of your life, then that should be the solution. But as we're going to talk about today, there is a biopsychosocial impact when it comes to emotional eating. And like I said, you are an emotional eater anytime there is fear that's driving your unwanted eating behavior. And fear, by the way, could be as simple as fear of missing out. Fear of missing out. Fear of not getting this food. Fear of being alone, which is why we snack at night. And so today we're going to be unpacking the biological impact on the body that continues to create those cravings. And so if you understand how your cravings arise from your biology, arise from your psychology, and arise also from your sociology, then you'll be able to break this pattern. And this is exactly what I do in the Make Peace with Food program, which is why it's so effective. And I see a lot of people who've been in therapy for a long time for emotional eating and binge eating. And the reason why they don't get to exactly where they want to be is because they're only focused on one of these three components. There's still a biological component and there's still a social component. And the same thing with diet. And the problem with diet is that diet's only going to address maybe the biological aspect. Sure, you can eat a certain way to try to regulate your insulin and maybe your cortisol, but there's still two other major components that are going to still keep you stuck. And so the good news is that there's, first of all, a way to get out of it. And the second part of the good news is that if you've been just focusing on one of these things, and you've been seeing somebody for a long time but not getting the results that you want, it's not because it's not working, it's because it's just incomplete. The approach is incomplete. And so you have to address these three parts so that you can rewire the brain, reprogram your nervous system, and then reset your metabolism. And resetting your metabolism, when we do that through the Make Peace with Food course and program, we do that in a way that's called creating your metabolic blueprint. It's first and foremost resetting and aligning all your hormones. And the hormones that I shared and I talked about in the Rapid Release Masterclass, I talked about two main hormones. They were insulin and cortisol. And those, yes, are two very important hormones to reset. But so is leptin, which is the satiety hormone. That is the hormone that tells you, I am full. So if you notice that you tend to still crave sweet things or even really salty things because your body's just looking for refined sugar, whether that's in the form of chips or in the form of a chocolate chip cookie. If you're craving something sweet or you have a hard time feeling full, you're kind of snacking all day long, and you're still, even after dinner, you could walk away full, but then maybe an hour later, you're still craving something. This is a sign that your leptin hormone is dysregulated. You have what's called leptin resistance. And leptin is this hormone that's released from your fat tissues, from your fat cells to say, hey, we're good, we're full, we're full. And then ghrelin is another important hormone. And ghrelin is your hunger hormone. And that's released from your stomach to say, hey, I'm hungry. I need to eat something. And so can you imagine what happens when this hormone is dysregulated? When it seems like your stomach's producing that all day long? You're always feeling hungry. You're always craving something to eat. It always feels like it's not enough, or you have to eat a very large volume of food to feel full and satisfied. And so when ghrelin and leptin are off, then we also have a hard time knowing when we're full, when we're hungry. Where does hunger begin and where does fullness end? We don't know those lines. And so it feels like this is a constant upward battle. And especially when you are emotionally eating, because you know when you're emotionally eating, when you're stressed or you're bored or you're worried or you are tired, any of these feelings, or maybe you're sick or you're ill, and you have this need to soothe with certain foods. Notice how intense that craving is. It comes out of nowhere. It's so sudden. It's so powerful. It's so intense, and it's so specific. Notice how you're craving something very specific. I need ice cream. I need something sweet. And when those cravings set in, you know that even if you win this little mini battle and decide to say, no, thank you, I'm not going to have it, I'm going to pass it, I'm going to use forced discipline, you know that that craving keeps coming back stronger and stronger and stronger. And then by the time you finally do have whatever it is you're craving, you end up overeating. You end up overeating. And if you are intermittent fasting, if that's a method that you're trying, which by the way, intermittent fasting is a very powerful tool. It's a very powerful health tool. The side effect of this health tool is weight release, if your body has weight to release. However, depending on your hormones being dysregulated, leptin and ghrelin, and if you are in protection mode, so if your nervous system is wired for survival to favor fat storage, to up those cravings, then intermittent fasting actually could be seen as a huge threat to the body. This could be seen as starvation. And what ends up happening when you skip a meal or then you decide to eat maybe at lunchtime or do that 24-hour fast is you end up making up for all the foods that your body missed out on the day before and then the next few days later. And you're binge eating. And so it's so important to notice these patterns. I want to talk to you about these patterns because if you're feeling like, man, like my neighbor did IF and it was great and she released 30 pounds and like here I am doing it and it's miserable. And when I break my fast, I'm like breaking it on something sweet. Like I want junk food or I want fast food. And then it just doesn't end. And then, oh my God, the thought of having to start my fast again drives me to eat even more because I know I'm going to be missing out. All of this does not mean you're broken. All of this means that there needs to be regulation in your hormones and in your metabolism. And this conversation right now today about metabolism is not just how fast you're able to burn calories at rest or how many calories you're able to burn at rest. I'm really talking about your total global orchestra of hormones that are working for you. And if you have leptin resistance, you're going to end up having insulin resistance. And if you have insulin resistance, that's where you're going to learn about prediabetes and diabetes. And that's where you start to see your A1C levels get affected. And if you have insulin resistance, and that continues on, in addition to leptin resistance, untreated or unaddressed, then you're going to start to see issues happening with your thyroid hormone. And so that's why it's so important to know that the body is also responding to this pattern that continues to manifest as cravings. And so the body is programmed through hormones. It's just reading the hormones and responding through the hormones to create those cravings. Like I shared with you, there's a biopsychosocial contribution to these cravings. This is the biological one. And I'm sorry to geek out a little bit today, but why I do want to geek out is because I want to take you away from calories in equals calories out. 9 grams or 9 calories per gram of fat versus 5 for carbohydrates or proteins. I want to move away from that conversation because it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. When your hormones are regulated, your body's not counting calories. Your body counts nutrients. And if it counts nutrients, it's also not triggering these intense cravings that you're experiencing. So put a 1 in the chat if you're following. Put a 2 in the chat if this is way too nerdy. If this is way too nerdy. And I'm losing you a little bit. Let me know. I want to get a temperature check. All right, 1, 1, 1. And don't be shy. If it's a 2, write a 2. That's totally okay. That's totally okay. All right, Janet, so happy you're here. So happy you're here. So I want to tell you today about what that craving looks like biologically. So if you followed Rapid Release, we spoke about the nervous system. We spoke a little bit about hormones. I mean, there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack, and it's so hard to get through all of the things I want to share with you in such a short amount of time. But like I said, I truly believe that information should be accessible. Information should be accessible. And if you're following these conversations with me, if you are joining any of my masterclasses, my goal is to give you my information. Information should be accessible, not free. Not free. This is not free. Why is this not free? Because you're here. You're putting in the time. You are taking notes. You're making notes. That's not free. That's accessible. And so when you access information and you use this information and you do something with it, now, like Will says, that's where the magic happens. That's where the magic happens. So my goal is to always have information accessible to you. And if you are a listener and subscriber of the Make Peace with Food podcast, I release 2 episodes every single week to make sure that this information is accessible to you. If you want to end the cravings, if you want to end emotional eating, and the cravings also, not just for food, but for alcohol, for cannabis, for shopping, for anything that you're using to cope, if you want to end the cravings, then these 3 things need to be addressed. And there's still a biological effect that happens when you, for example, press purchase now on that Amazon shopping cart, or when you download something that you were looking for and it was just on your mind all the time. There is something that happens biologically, and this is a dopamine reward system. This is another hormone that's released in the brain that creates pleasure for us. And so what I want to talk to you about today is what's happening to drive those cravings biologically in your body. So yes, there's a huge overlap with nervous system, and there's going to be a huge overlap also when we start to talk about the social aspect. But I want to bring your attention today to what's actually happening in the body to cause those cravings. So 2 systems I want to share with you today. Write this down. 2 systems that are happening that are causing the cravings. Number 1, there's a dopamine reward system happening in the brain. Anytime you create a dopamine reward system in the brain, this is exactly what happens. This is exactly what happens. You actually, and I'm going to share my screen here. you actually create what's called an addiction. What's called an addiction. And this is a subconscious record. I'm going to just drop this here. I want to give you a little bit of, and have your protection mode just get triggered just a little bit, because I want you to come back tomorrow and I want to continue to talk about this with you. But what I want you to take away from today is just understand that anytime we have a discomfort or we are in pain, it does not be physical pain, it could also be emotional pain. Anytime we have a discomfort or pain and we do something, whether we take a substance or we do an action or engage in an activity or behavior that gives us instant reward or pleasure, there's dopamine that's released. There's dopamine that's released in the brain. And dopamine is the reward hormone. It's that reward hormone. It's what's released when you take that first bite of ice cream, or that first puff of your cigarette, or that first buzz you get from your glass of wine. That's dopamine release. And if you continue to do this over and over and over again, and you run this over and over and over again, that's where your mind now stores that pattern and it becomes an addiction. It knows when feeling uncomfortable and I'm feeling exactly this way, then that is bad and that's dangerous. And what I'm going to do to feel better is this thing, because it works every time. If I drink this thing, or if I eat this thing, or if I buy this thing, I feel better instantly. And that's what the brain remembers, it stores, and it continues to run on repeat. Feel this way is bad. If I use this thing, it's going to make me feel good. And that's a dopamine release. So that's one way that you train your body to have those cravings. So as soon as the body recognizes that feeling of stress or that feeling of boredom or there's nothing else to do, it's after dinner and I'm just going to sit here on the couch and I'm feeling lonely, or thank God the kids are finally in bed and I get this time to myself. And then all of a sudden you give yourself something that's going to release a very large amount of dopamine, and you do that on repeat, it becomes an addiction. Okay? So your body's physically, as they say, addicted to that substance or that behavior. Okay? Put a 1 in the chat if you're getting it. Put a 1 in the chat if you're getting it. All right. All right. What a bunch of awesome nerds you guys are. That's awesome. That's so good. That's so good. Okay. Now, number 2. Okay, I'm going to tell you another way that your body is creating cravings. Okay. Linda says, yes, when kids go to bed, it's a stress release. That's right. When kids go to bed, that's right. Or that Friday night after a long week of work, or you just finished month's end, or you just went through your last exam, your last final, right? That's the dopamine reward. So thank you for sharing that. And I want you all to recognize this pattern. Right? And if it's not food, it could be TV. And if it's not TV, it could be social media. I mean, you're sitting there in the doctor's office and you're noticing that your phone is vibrating and you're getting all these messages. Like, think of how uneasy you feel until you finally check. Right? And then you feel that sense of relief when you check. That is a dopamine reward. Right? And so is shopping. I know many people who've racked up credit card debts, shopping and buying clothes and things, and yet still they can't stop. Right? And so that's another behavior. And we're not here to judge. We're here to work on ourselves. We get nothing by judging ourselves. It doesn't resolve anything. It doesn't benefit us. And if you have been working on your health for a long time, you also know that you judging yourself for not being where you are has never helped you achieve what you wanted to achieve. So we're not here to judge. We're here to get curious. And if you're following my content and if you're in my programs, you know that that's the one energy that I always want you to use to move towards whatever recovery you want to move towards. Curiosity. The more curious you are, which means you're not being judgmental, the more you're going to create awareness. And if you create awareness, you're going to see these patterns. And if you see these patterns and you can unpluck them, then boom, you've got healing. And I shared with you that we're going to talk about the psychological aspects also that are keeping you stuck in these patterns. And the psychological aspects, as well as the social aspects, are very, very important. And that's where tools like hypnotherapy can be of great benefit. Because you may be running a pattern, like parental disapproval syndrome, for example, and very unaware that that's what you're doing. Or you may have an unconscious death urge, and you don't know that that's what you're doing. And that's why on day 2, we're going to be unpacking that. We're going to talk way more about that, so you can start to recognize these patterns. But imagine what would happen if you can recognize the biological patterns, you can recognize the psychological patterns, and then you can also recognize your social patterns that are getting you to self-sabotage, that are driving all of your unwanted behavior. Again, whether that's eating or shopping or cannabis use or alcohol use, or even your tendency to keep getting in that same type of relationship. And that starts to get really, really deep. So the other pattern that I want you to recognize, the other biological pattern, is the actual sugar craving. And I spoke to you about insulin and I spoke to you about cortisol in the Rapid Release Masterclass. So as a super quick review, when you are in protection mode, when you are in fight or flight response, your adrenal glands are secreting cortisol and adrenaline. Adrenaline gives you like those superpowers where you could do crazy things and you're not thinking about anything and you can move things quickly, you can lift things quickly. It literally makes you stronger, like physically stronger when there's adrenaline circulating through your body. And you have not that much of a heightened sensation for pain. You can actually tolerate pain a lot easier when you have a lot of adrenaline going through your body. But cortisol has a different job. Cortisol has the job of supplying you instant energy. So this means that cortisol needs to make sure you always have an easy form of sugar circulating through your blood. And not just circulating through your blood, but also very close to your organs so that it can be accessed easier and close more specifically to the liver. So when cortisol is high, you're going to have more cravings. It's going to turn on the binge response mechanism in your brain to make sure that it's like you're a bottomless pit. You can eat like a bottomless pit. You have cravings to be able to feast. And so it's also very specific to foods that are going to give it that instant, simple supply of sugar. So then your cravings will be for refined foods, simple carbohydrates, anything that has a lot of calories, a lot of energy for a very small amount. And so when you're driven to have those cravings and you eat those foods that are refined in carbohydrates, your pancreas is going to release insulin. And insulin has 2 jobs. It is a storage hormone, and then also it is a fat suppressor. So meaning when insulin's in the bloodstream, it's going to take all of your sugar that's floating around the blood and it's going to store it. And if cortisol's there, it's going to store it closer to the belly, near the liver, so that it can be accessed much, much quicker. And then the other thing it's going to do is it's going to make sure that there's no way that whatever's already in storage is going to get out. That's the job of the storage hormone. And so when these 2 hormones are both circulating through the body, you're going to have that tendency to want to eat more refined foods, and then store it, and then prevent anything from storage to actually get released. And so where are the cravings coming from? Well, the cravings are coming from cortisol, right? Because cortisol drives those sugar cravings, but the cravings are also coming from the dip in blood sugar. So anytime your body's noticing, oh, blood sugar went up and now it went right back down, then that's a craving. And then you're going to want to eat something sweet. And then all of a sudden your blood sugar is going to go up, insulin's going to go up, and then insulin's going to bring all of that blood sugar to storage. And as soon as that happens, you're going to have another craving. And so this also explains why in the middle of the afternoon, you may tend to have those cravings for something sweet. And so, do you recognize this pattern? Do you recognize this pattern? Noticing that you're always maybe craving something sweet, or needing something sweet after a meal, or craving something sweet after dinner. And noticing also that it's very much tied to an emotional event, which could also be boredom. All right, so I'm getting a lot of yeses. All right. Tomorrow, we're going to continue to unpack this. And what's really cool about these 3 days is that I am going to help you really retain this information, because I like to do things on repeat. So today I shared with you different hormones that are at play when it comes to creating those cravings. And why this is important to learn is because, again, when you understand that the cravings are biological and that regulating your hormones can help reduce the cravings, and then you also work on the other components of the nervous system as well as your social environment, then you've put all of the right pieces together. Tomorrow, when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to talk now about the psychological aspects of cravings, what's behind the cravings when it comes to the psychology of cravings, where we're going to talk about the nervous system and get you closer to painting that picture around what you need to do. And again, this is the exact strategy that I use with my clients to help them abolish the cravings and make peace with food. So I want to thank you for joining me here today. It's been such an honor to serve you. I will see you tomorrow.